When I was born, my biological father said two distinct things. The first thing he said was,
Oh, what is that thing?
yeah, he wouldn't stay as my father for too long after that, to be honest, but it was the second thing that imprinted onto my squishy clay-like mind. It was a simple question, but it would follow me for the rest of my life. He leaned over, watching my flailing infantile form, and he proclaimed,
Have you seen Farscape?
Look, you've seen the title of this video, probably the thumbnail too. There's either two reasons you clicked on this video. Either A, you're like me and have already seen the underrated sci-fi gem that is Farscape, or B, you clicked on this video randomly as you doom-scrolled the vicious storm that is the YouTube algorithm, which, if your reason is the second one, then I'm glad to be your little intergalactic rest stop to weather the infinite improbability that is the next time you wake up from your walking dream. Low-scale, existential crises based on jokes aside, let's ask the actual question. What is Farscape? Farscape is a science fiction series that ran from 1999 to 2003, eventually getting a follow-up miniseries in 2004. We'll get back to that. It was an Australian and American co-production. It was created by Rockne S. O'Bannon and was executive produced and created by Brian Henson and the Jim Henson Company. Yeah, that Jim Henson Company. Let me show you some of the phenomenal practical effects on this show. Damn, those aliens are freaky in the best way possible. Jim Henson Company cooks throughout this whole series. As someone who's probably watched way too many sci-fi series for my own good, I got used to taking a lot of the fine practical effects and costumes. Usually sci-fi shows, practical effects from the time were kind of similar to like Star Trek's, which usually boiled down to like very straightforward headpieces, like Klingons, Romulans, etc. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I think it adds to the show's charms, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I do want to see something that is alien, strange, non-human. Which, I'll be honest, is something the Jim Henson Company nailed in this series. I mean, just look at some of these effects and these puppets and these animatronics, they're wild. Of course, I mean, the writing of the show was on point too. I mean, the show did get 4 seasons. You don't get more than a season if your writing is awful. Okay, that we follow John Crichton, an IASA astronaut. No, not NASA. No, they'll sue us. No, we can't use. No, it has to be IASA because yeah, they'll sue. John is the first astronaut testing a new experimental spacecraft called the Farscape 1. You see what they. You see? Are you? Did you? Everything goes well until. Oh no! John gets into a weird accident in space and ends up in a place he doesn't even know of. He eventually makes his way onto the ship Moya, but unknown to him, everyone on the ship are criminals who are escaping a group called the Peacekeepers, which the Peacekeepers are space cops, but add a little bit of evil, possible if not actual fascism. They're not good. They're not good people. We don't like them. We don't like Peacekeepers here. We don't like them. So now, John lives on Moya, which by the way, is a living spaceship. And I don't mean as in like AI with sentience. No, I mean like she, yes, Moya is a she, has organs, nerve endings, while also being controlled like a spaceship. She's a big biomechanical living thing with thoughts and needs of her own. John now has to learn how to live in this alien world and maybe find his way back home if he can. I know that premise sounds pretty straightforward, but that's because I'm really cutting a lot of extra details out. I'm mainly just keeping like the basic pieces of info we're introduced to in the first few minutes of episode 1. The thing about Farscape, it has a traditional start to a sci-fi series and very quickly finds a way to bend every single trope in the genre to its whim. With the premise out of the way, let's talk about the characters.
Identify yourselves immediately. We're so screwed, and we're gonna die!
I mean, I've already given you the premise of the story, so you'd probably assume that John is a classic fish out of water character, which, somewhat true. Honestly, I think the writers of the series accomplished making John a great everyman character while still making him incredibly competent. He's shown to be a scientist and a smart guy, but he isn't like a super genius like Tony Stark or the Big Bang fellow. In fact, he's kinda interesting because while he still has these nerdy archetypes, such as referencing pop culture, knowing science, he also tends to make plans, and sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail. Honestly, when I say plans, I mean more just major gambles that sometimes pay out, sometimes don't. In fact, most of the time it seems like John Crichton is just flying off the seat of his pants. He's not a complete idiot, mind you. Usually his scientific know-how is how the crew of Moya even survive half their missions anyway. But his lack of knowledge of the cultures and societies within the galaxy are what hold him back sometimes.
I will help you.
You can barely help yourself. Look at you, you're weak, you're all used up, and you're no use to me.
No use?
I've seen bigger.
Now I know what you're thinking. That's probably a human. Well, John Crichton did too, but no, Aaron is actually a Sebacean. They look like humans, but are actually cold-blooded and, well, they also aren't from Earth, obviously. Actually, almost all, I said almost all, Sebaceans are raised from birth to join the Peacekeepers. Yeah, you remember those guys, the evil fascist-ass space cops? Yeah, those guys. She was one of them, which actually makes Aaron one of the most competent characters in the show. She's probably the best fighter in the series, or at least out of the crew on Moya. Though she isn't some complete stone-cold badass. She's got issues opening up and has a lot of trauma due to being raised in a peacekeeper society. She's part of a long line of badass women in sci-fi. Not the first, but definitely one of the best.
Okay, prepare for engagement.
Excuse me?
Dargo's a personal favorite character of mine in the show. Well, alright, I like almost all the main characters of this show, but I like Dargo especially. Dargo is a Luxan, which is a warrior race of people who are proud of their lineage.
That's just like the Klingon.
Shut up, I will scrape your—
No, they're not like Klingons. They're actually quite a unique culture with systems based on honor, honesty, and strength. Honestly, Dargo is an interesting character. He's a man who's trying to present as someone who's this stoic leader warrior type, but you actually soon learn that he's very young for his species. In terms of his species, he's about in his early 20s. When you actually begin to examine his actions, you realize he's just someone trying to figure himself out. He's phenomenal.
Rigel, now. Now, Rigel! Take them!
We love Rigel here. Rigel is the former ruler of his homeworld of Hyneria, until he was thrown out by his cousin and taken prisoner by the Peacekeepers. The best way I could describe Rigel as is a complete dirtbag. He's a man that thinks he always has some kind of power or some bargain in a situation, even if he doesn't have anything to bargain or have power over. That idea never really leaves his mind either. He always thinks he has some sort of say in every scenario. Again, even when he doesn't. He's sort of the comedic relief of the group, and they do a perfect job at making him that.
Part of me enjoyed that.
If Rigel is the comedic relief of the show, then Zahn is the heart of the show. Zahn is a Delvian, which are actually—
Is she an avatar?
Do you wanna not cut me off? Delvians are actually plants. They're incredibly psychic. She's a Pau, which is more or less a psychic Delvian priest that usually use their powers to ease the suffering of others. Because of this, she's incredibly empathetic and usually tries to guide people down the right path. Now, I could talk about why she became a prisoner of the Peacekeepers like Dargo and Rigel, but that's heavy spoilers. We'll keep that for later.
Blah, pilot, I'm clear. Detach the door. And suck this bitch out.
Yes, his name is actually Pilot. That's because he's the pilot of Moya. You see, Moya is a species called Leviathans, and due to their nature of being biomechanical spaceships made for others, they need to be physically bonded with a pilot, which is where Pilot comes in. Pilot species have a symbiotic and emotional bond with Leviathans. They are usually loyal friends or begrudging servants of those who live or ride aboard Leviathans. Pilot is a pretty passive person, all things considered, very rarely exploding or lashing out at others. He really only looks out for Moya and his best interests. He's a loyal friend and a phenomenal pilot.
We don't have weapons on our planet. We don't have violence. We don't have warfare. What the frell? See? Violence. You'll get the hang of it.
Chiana's interesting because she's the only crew member of Moya, at least early on, who doesn't have any affiliation or issue with the Peacekeepers. Though she was a prisoner of a different faction, the Nabari, of which she is a member of their species. Nabari are hyperconformists, to the point of drugging and mind-wiping their own kind to fit in. Which means that Chiana became the most rebellious member of her species, as well as the most rebellious on Moya. She's loud, crass, and just does whatever she wants because she can.
John! Take revenge, John!
Scorpius is who I'd call the main villain of Farscape, or at least one of the main villains. He's manipulative, borderline psychotic, an evil bastard. He's always finding his way to force the crew of Moya into a corner or forcing them to give him what he wants, and half the time, he does that without even being there. He's a genius, especially when it comes to strategy, and somehow you believe that he has a backup plan for every time he fails. Yet, he also has a twisted sense of honor for the thing he does, and sometimes even has a twisted sense of love and compassion for the people that he's messing with. He's a twisted person, that's for sure. I'd say more, but that'd end up spoiling most of the show. You know what, let's just get into spoilers already now that I'm talking about it. Hey, seriously, I'm going to spoil a lot of the moments in the show. Skip to this time code right down here if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever. But if you are someone who needs to be spoiled just a little bit to get into a show, stay here. This part might get a little bit more rambly because, well, I'm just going to talk about my favorite moments and episodes. So you've been warned. I'm going to go over this season by season, kind of just discussing the best moments and episodes, obviously. I also want to put this forward. This is not a skip or watch guide. I'm not going to do that. There's probably lists out there already like that. I'm just talking about my favorite episodes and stuff, just FYI. So there probably isn't going to be much to talk about when it comes to Season 1. Like most shows, Season 1 is where they're getting on their footing. Thus, most of the great stuff comes later. And that means Season 1 has the most episodes I say you could skip on first viewing. Though there's still some phenomenal episodes there, of which I'll talk about right now. The pilot. Obviously, you're going to have to watch the first episode. It's the damn phenomenal premiere episode. Introduces all the characters and concepts in ways that somehow makes complete sense to the audience, which, trust me, is a feat of great writing itself because Farscape is incredibly high concept compared to most shows. Thank God it's Friday. Again. Rigel pisses fire in this episode, that's all I really need to say. DNA mad scientist. This episode is the best showcase of Farscape's great practical effects, at least in Season 1. Namtar, who is the DNA mad scientist in question, is an amazing suit and effect. I mean, just look at him. He isn't some floating CGI head or whatever. It's a real thing, made to be on your screen. Plus, this is just a great horror episode. I'm honestly a sucker for when Farscape handles horror elements because they do it so well. The Flax. This episode is just super fun. I mean, it's about space pirates. When are space pirates never fun? I kind of don't want to spoil this for you because it's more fun to experience it in real time. Rhapsody in Blue. This is an episode that really lets you into Zahn's head. No, literally, there is a part where John melds with Zahn's mind. It's an episode that really lets you understand why Zahn is the person she is. Durka returns. This is the first episode to meet Chiana, so at least it's an important episode to the story. But it's also an episode where we learn more about the Nabari, which I will say I wish Farscape did a little bit more with, but they don't really, so... A human reaction. This episode is a hint at what's to come for Farscape. This episode is abstract, out of control, and very creative. Seriously, I don't even want to tell you anything about it. Just go and watch it. It'll get stuck in your head. A Bug's Life. Just a fun episode. Honestly, Crichton's horrific Australian or British accent is just... it sells it alone. Nerve. This is where we first meet Scorpius, and yeah, he's terrifying. He's terrifying. The Hidden Memory. This is a direct follow-up to Nerve, and this episode is the start to almost every overarching plotline in the entire series. Also, a spaceship gives birth to a baby spaceship. Yeah, that really happens. And those are the general best episodes from Season 1, in my opinion. On to Season 2. Season 2 is when Farscape starts to really get into high gear. This is where, honestly, there's at most, like, 2 episodes I say you could skip. This season has a phenomenal overarching plot. And yes, this is a major spoiler, but the main arc of this season is basically that Scorpius put his personality into John's brain. He more or less updated his brain into John's brain like a Trojan horse virus. It even possesses him at one point. He becomes like Scorpius 2.0 at some point. Anyways, on to my recommended episode. Crackers Don't Matter.
We are going to die.
Basically, the crew of Moya all go a little insane over crackers. It's a phenomenal episode that really highlights the absolute insanity that Farscape frequently steps into. It's a top 10 episode of Farscape, easily. The Way We Weren't. This episode is just an emotional masterclass. This might be the best episode for both Pilot and Aaron. This is also in my top 10, hell, maybe even top 5 episodes for Farscape. Out of Their Minds. Fun body swap episode, but now with the Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. Look at the Princess Trilogy. This is actually the first 3-parter in Farscape, and it's great. There's a lot happening here, and it's completely off the wall. Crichton gets turned into a statue, blows up a ship, threatens to kill himself, and also launches himself into space. We also get introduced to the Scarans in this episode. Keep an eye on them, they'll be important later. Won't Get Fooled Again. This episode, like many episodes in Farscape, will screw with you the entire time you're watching it. It's classic psychotic Farscape that we all know and love. Liars, Guns, and Money Trilogy. One of the best bank heist stories I've seen in a sci-fi show. I'm a sucker for heist stories in general, but this one is great. And in classic Farscape fashion, everything goes wrong. Die Me Dichotomy.
Aaron, don't come after me. I'm not in control.
I'm not even going to say anything, just watch the episode. Well, with that being said, that's what I consider the best of Season 2. Now, on to the big one. Season 3. Season 3 is peak Farscape. Seriously, there is almost no skip episodes here whatsoever. It's some of the best sci-fi I've ever experienced. Not watched, experienced. That includes books, games, etc. This season deserves all the love that it gets and then some. And the fact that Farscape doesn't get the same flowers as other sci-fi series is a shame. Because this season proves that it can box with the greats of the genre. When editing this script, I had to delete half the episode recommendations because it was literally 97% of the entire season. Season of Death. So this episode is actually a follow-up to Die Me Dichotomy, the last episode of Season 2. Let's just say shit hits the fan. Self-inflicted wounds duology. These episodes, yeah, they hurt a lot. No, not because they're bad, but because they'll probably make some of you cry. Eat Me. You know, I never actually used to be terrified of cloning, but this episode made me completely horrified by the concept. Also, this sets up the overarching plot for this season. Green-eyed monster. Remember in Empire Strikes Back when the Millennium Falcon was in that space worm thing? What if we did that and made it a whole episode and a little bit grosser? In a good way. Fun fact, Ben Browder, the actor of John Crichton, actually wrote this episode. Good for him. Incubator. Yeah, we learn a lot about Scorpius in this episode. This dude's backstory is insane. Scratch and Sniff. Space Vegas, I mean, that's all it needs to be said. Infinite Possibilities Duology.
Don't worry about me. I've never felt better.
These may be the best episodes of Farscape. Period. Revenging Angel. John has a mental breakdown in the form of a Wile E. Coyote cartoon. It's fun. The Choice. This episode is sort of the follow-up to Infinite Possibilities. It's great, and it's also heart-wrenching. I yench, you yench. You know, I think negotiations for an entire episode would be boring, but of course, Farscape makes it very fun. It's got an out-of-the-box concept, and it's also an out-of-the-box episode. Into the Lion's Den duology.
Tommy. Gandhi. You still going after Earth?
To what purpose? Vengeance against you? The only vengeance I cared about is no longer within my grasp.
This is a climactic end to a lot of plot lines. It's kind of a must-watch, but you'll watch it anyway if you're already in this deep. Dog with Two Bones. The perfect little epilogue to everything that's happened to Season 3 so far. Alright, now with all that being said, let's get on to, sadly, our final season of Farscape. Or at least, the final full season of Farscape. Season 4 is an interesting beast. It's the beginning of the end for the show, and thus most of the season is doing the legwork to make the finale a big blast like they planned it to be. It'd probably stand the time a little bit better if the Sci-Fi Channel didn't cancel the series. Yeah, Farscape got canceled around this time, and it pissed off a lot of people. I mean, they tried to cancel it before, but fan outcry saved it every single time. But now they actually had a reason to cancel it. Have you ever heard of Stargate SG-1? Or rather, the Stargate franchise in general? I don't know if people still talk about it. Yeah, you know, that show, the one that's pretty solid. I've barely watched it. It seems pretty good. See, the Sci-Fi Channel canceled Farscape because Stargate was cheaper to make and got more viewers. Now, why didn't Sci-Fi just let Farscape end the way they wanted while also letting Stargate continue its dominance? What are you, an optimist? This is corporate capitalism, not an art show. Look, I have no beef with Stargate. In fact, it's a very solid show from what I've seen, like genuinely. There's a reason why it was popular. It's really good. It actually is really good, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. But
One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song?
who still talks about Stargate? I'm not even saying it's a bad show. In fact, I think, again, it's a good show, but I don't really meet people who still talk about the Stargate franchise as a whole. In fact, I've actually met quite a lot of people in person, as well as online, who still talk about Farscape. On every sci-fi YouTuber's channel, you see people asking if they'll ever cover Farscape. I don't really see people all that often saying, when are you gonna cover Stargate? And I don't know if that's against Stargate or not, but it seems that maybe Farscape was tapping into a pulse of people that would stay around forever. And I don't know, like, I just don't see people, again, talk about Stargate in the same way they do, like, Babylon 5, Star Trek, hell, even, like, Star Wars shows. And I usually find at least 2 or 3 comments talking and gushing about Farscape. I also just don't really see any creatives in the business talk about how Stargate influenced them. Though I know for a fact that Farscape has influenced very popular sci-fi series. And look, if you don't believe me, have you ever heard of... Yeah, Farscape has influenced a ton of sci-fi after it, and Guardians of the Galaxy is one of those examples amongst a lot of others. Trust me, you'll notice that a lot of sci-fi shows after Farscape came out have a lot of references to Farscape. Hell, Stargate has a reference to Farscape in it. It seems like maybe even the fans of Stargate liked it too. And hey, I don't blame them, it's a good show. I'm glad you guys have good taste. But why did one show have to succeed for the other one to die? I mean, think about it like this. Cowboy Bebop. Imagine if Cowboy Bebop had to be ended at episode 11 because, well, Gundam just needed the budget. Or if Star Trek TNG was canceled because Babylon 5 was just simply outselling it. It's just kind of ridiculous. Mind you, we were literally one season away from the ending of the show, or at least ending the show the way the creators wanted. But hey, at least we did get a 4th season and a mini-series afterwards. Even if it wasn't what the creators wanted, at least we gotta respect it. So without further ado, my recommended episodes of Farscape Season 4. What We Lost duology. The gang's all back together, or at least mostly everyone. Good episode. Don Quixote. Another episode written by Ben Browder, and it's also completely insane. I gotta love it. Unrealized Reality, Kansas, Terra Firma. Another 3-parter, haven't seen one of these in a while, and this one's phenomenal, really pulls at your heartstrings. Though, this whole season kinda does that. Constellation of Doubt. Another bizarre yet captivating episode. The show just gets more and more unhinged as it goes along. We're So Screwed trilogy. This is the final 3-parter we got of the whole series. It's great, or at least goes out on a bang. This is kind of the best way to end the series, but also an agonizing way to end the series. Sure, we still eventually got an ending, but I couldn't imagine being a fan and this is the ending we were stuck with for years. After Season 4, there was a few years when there was no Farscape whatsoever. Mind you, people were clamoring for it all over the place. Farscape had a pretty devout fan base across the globe, but there was nothing to come of it. I guess the Sci-Fi Channel just didn't want to do anything with it. But eventually, after enough clamoring, we got the Peacekeeper Wars. Obviously, this is a must-watch. It literally is the ending to the series, and it's great for what it is, but I'll admit it clearly shows its budget constraints and some of the rust writing. To explain further, Farscape, as I said before, was supposed to have a 5th season, but was canceled before then. And pretty much they had to take everything from a 22-episode season they had planned and cram it all into 3 hours. Well, yeah, you can kind of see the problem with that, right? So, let's just say that it's really good, but part of me kind of wishes we got a season. Hell, even a smaller season that was about 13 episodes would have done better to really flesh out what was going on. Because of that, a lot of things just seem really rushed, and honestly, sometimes the characters act a little bit out of character. Not all the time, but at least 1 or 2 characters just completely change personalities. But what can you do? That's what we got. Okay, spoiler talk done. If I haven't already convinced you, then I guess I failed at this video. But if you have, please, go watch Farscape. It's a phenomenal series with a lot of influence, a lot of love, and honestly, you don't really see a lot of that stuff anymore. This was really a show that was pushing the line, even if it wasn't benefiting it. Honestly, I recommend watching it to really see all these people pushing their artistic integrity forward despite the situation they were forced into. It's a labor of love, and you can tell. That's why so many people love this show. That's why I love it too. So please, go watch Farscape.